And now, without further ado, after 19 months and too many minutes of opening remarks, it is finally time to introduce the Wonder Women Class of 20. Normally, I start this part of the program by answering two questions I'm constantly asked. What does it take to be a Malta Wonder Woman, and how do you choose them? A Malta House of Care Wonder Woman is someone who is known for her achievements, personal and professional, but most of all for her service. She is someone who focuses more on others than herself, who strives constantly to make her community better, often behind the scenes or under the radar. How do we choose them? We start with nominations from all of you. 69 different nominations for the class of 20. And then our selection committee uses an anonymous electronic voting tool to whittle down that list in a series of rounds of voting until we end up with 6 honorees, and this year 7, since one of them is a pair. But as I prepared my introductions of this year's class, the pandemic class, I couldn't help but notice some other traits that they all share. Wonder Women are resilient, resourceful, problem-solving, and no matter what, uncommonly focused on helping others, even when constrained by a public health crisis that turned their worlds upside down. Our Wonder Women are people. So during the past year and a half, it was torture for them to be alone, isolated, cut off from the work that brings them life. And so they found other ways to serve. To use the word of the moment, they pivoted. They Zoomed. Boy, did they Zoom. They took online classes. They hosted virtual fundraisers, drive-by toy drives, and drop-off donations of medication and other essentials. They brought food to people who were isolated and figured out how to safely provide groceries to people who counted on them each week by using an enormous conveyor belt. So many of us felt stalled these past 19 months, but these Wonder Women kept moving. Our lives seemed frozen, yet theirs were changing, compelled by their desire to keep doing good, to keep figuring out ways to serve others, even if it was from a distance. And so this year, I present to you the Wonder Women Class of 20. Not at all the same people they were in April of 2020 when they should have been honored, but it could be said that as a result of the pandemic, they've invented even better versions of themselves. And now I'll introduce them to you one by one. We'll start with Maurice, Adonis of Newington. An aura of joy. That's how Maurice was described on her nomination form. Her nominator said she'd never known anyone like her, a woman who spends her time focused on some of the poorest people in the world, who live in the most desperate of conditions, and whose region seems to get more than its fair share of tragedy. Hurricanes, earthquakes. It is depressing just thinking about it. Yet Maurice remains joyful. Well, she gets frustrated, of course, at the injustice, the inhumanity. But she has channeled that frustration into action, and it's what propelled her to start Arm to Arm, the humanitarian organization she founded in 2005. It's why, when she hears even more bad news from Haiti, that she organizes one more collection, one more awareness campaign, one more shipment of a container of supplies to the Dominican Republic or Haiti, where she was born. Before the pandemic, Maurice and her volunteers would travel to the Caribbean at least twice a year with Arm to Arm to deliver these supplies in person. Of course, she hasn't been there in a while, and she says she can't wait to get back. I love it, Maurice says, adding that the humanitarian work is what makes her life worth living. We are all children of God, and we are here for a purpose. Maurice, I'm going to give you the microphone. Honorees was given 2 questions before this evening to think about, knowing that after I introduced them, I would be asking them to reflect a little bit on their service. And so it's time for your question. my question for Maurice is, what is really your tip or your trick to maintain sanity and focus and a positive spirit when you seriously are looking at a part of our world that just seems so desperately in trouble all the time?
Let me take a deep breath here. Michelle, first I'd like to thank everyone for being here tonight. And Michelle, thank you so much for your nice introduction. I'm a little bit emotional right now. I'll be okay. To answer your question, Michelle, first I stay calm and focusing from there, I start to think about a creative way to help our brothers and sisters. There is no benefits on panicking when there is so many people in need after a natural disaster. How do I stay calm? And then the trick, a glass of wine always helps.
Maurice, in our conversations, that when you imagine a meaningful life, that is not something that includes millions of dollars. Where did you get your sense of purpose, your sense of meaning?
I think I gained wisdom over the years, and I truly believe that even though money is necessary to live and make a comfortable life, money does not guarantee happiness. For me, happiness is when I can make a difference in someone's life. That's what happiness means for me.
Thank you. We can see that you must be very happy because you make many, many people's lives better. Thank you so much. Our next Wonder Woman is Ana Alfaro from Windsor. It is safe to say that in the Latino community of Greater Hartford, Ana Alfaro is something of a celebrity. After all, she has her own TV show, El Show de Anale, which airs every Saturday morning on Univision. Produced in conjunction with Capital Community College, Ana's show attracts local experts or elected officials who speak about issues of concern to the community: education, immigration, COVID-19, elections. But that's what Ana does in her spare time. During the work week, she works as a senior community relations specialist for Eversource Energy, where she has worked for more than 20 years, in a role for which she seems particularly well suited. Between her two lives, personal and professional, Ana is always in front of people, always in the public eye. Yet she uses those platforms not for personal glory, but to bring attention to corners of the Hartford region that might otherwise get overlooked. She is a strong proponent of the arts. A native of Honduras, she organizes festivals to honor different Latin American countries. And she is a highly sought-after board member, currently serving with the Hartford Public Library, Billings Forge, and the Connecticut Immigrant Hall of Fame. And for 11 years running now, Ana has organized a toy drive each December. Last year, the donations were dropped off in drive-by fashion to make sure that kids have Christmas no matter their circumstances. For all of these very public efforts, Ana ironically recedes from the spotlight whenever she can, preferring to deflect attention and credit to others once she's sure the focus is on the right thing. In the words of her nominator, Ana leads by example and has a gift for finding and pulling out the best of people and their communities. Her passion is amazing and inspiring, wrote her nominator. Thank you, Ana. So my first question to Ana was, how did you start your TV show in the first place? What even compelled you to start that?
Well, Michelle, thank you so much, and thank all of you for your support. I'm feeling very emotional right now also. with this honor. And thinking back and just listening to all we do, right? And we just get it done, basically. I started the TV show El Show de Ana Lee. Actually, my TV host career started as a volunteer at NBC 30. We used to have a show, local community show called Adelante. Black Perspective was another show. What About Women was another show. So I was really a volunteer that NBC 30 trained us how to produce and host a TV show. And it was really a wonderful experience for me, because coming from the Bronx, New York, moving to Hartford, Connecticut about 35 plus years ago, really this Adelante show was the only vehicle and the only show that I saw where I could see what was going on in the community. So I learned a lot of what was happening in our Hartford community from Adelante. In fact, one of your board members, Dr. Luis Diaz, was also a producer and host of the show. So, you know, throughout the years, we really kept the show on the air, and then as all of you know, things change, right? Life changes, and look at what we live in today, a pandemic, and our worlds have changed. And so NBC 30, you know, wanted to change our schedule to earlier, like 5 in the morning, 4:30 in the morning. We said, no, ningún Latino va a estar viendo un show a las 4:30 de la mañana. No, a Latino community not going to be watching a show at 4:30 in the morning, right? I know I don't get up at 4:30 in the morning to see TV. So a few of us that were already working with this for many years, we said we were ready. We were ready to start a new show. And, you know, that will inform, that would, you know, engage the community, that would empower the community with all the information that was really needed. And at the time, which was 15 years ago, about 17, we knew that the community in Connecticut was growing from, the Latino community in Connecticut was growing from Mexicans, Central Americans. And so I just thought back to my story, you know. When I moved here, where did I get my information, right? Was the TV show Adelante. And so we wanted to continue that legacy and do that. And so there were many obstacles. I know part of your question is how many obstacles. So we started knocking on doors. So where is this show going to air? Where are we going to produce this show? How are we going to make it happen, right? So there were so many variables and so much going on. But, you know, thank God, we were able to have Univision at the time welcome us. Also, Capital Community College, you know, we after almost a year of having meetings with Capital Community College and the media department, they decided, okay, let's do a pilot. So we started with a pilot because they wanted to see, do we know what we're doing? You know, are we going to make this successful? And the key here was the students. So the students that were enrolled in media, it was a great way for them to practice, right? Mm-hmm. So the first pilot program, it was a success. And about a week later, the media director said, Anna, let's do it. The students loved it. We were going to continue this. It's going to be wonderful. And here we are today, 15 years ago. And like you said, we cover, you know, all the topics that are important for our Latino community to be aware. And as Malta House of Care, you know, the well-being of all of us is important, the well-being of so for me, the well-being of our community, same as Eversource, you know, the well-being and taking care of each other is so important. So, you know, there's so many different ways that we do this, as my friend here said, and I think for me is the communication and the way that I just connect with our Latino community to make sure that they are informed and empowered with the information they need.
Well, congratulations. That's quite a journey, and it seems to be a very popular show. My only follow-up question, Anna, was, as you know, I figure that you don't go anywhere without everyone knowing who you are, and do you ever wish to just run into the Stop and Shop incognito?
Well, I gotta say, Michelle, it took about maybe 5 years into the show being on the air for people to begin to recognize me. So it does take time to build relationships and to get people to know you. So, but I say that, you know, Anna is a mom, Anna is a friend, Anna is an auntie, Anna is just Anna. And there are many times when I question myself, and it's just so much going on that I said, do I really want to continue this producing this show? It's a lot of work. It's another full time. I don't do it alone. We have a great team of producers and production team that does it. Without them, I couldn't do this. Even being on camera, if I don't have a camera person, so what? You know, I can be on camera, right? If I don't have my camera person. So when I have those days and I go to the supermarket and I find someone say, oh, Anna, you Anna Lee, and I'm like, yes. Oh, I watch your show and it's great. I was able to get this service because of what you presented on this show. And that for me just tells me just keep going. Because it just tells me, keep going. I'm sure it's the same for you and for all of us, you know, when we have that moment that we know that we just can't anymore, or we're just too much, but, you know, we have that one person that says, you made a difference in my life. And because of you and your show, I was able to go to this program or that service, and we're grateful, so.
That's wonderful. That must be satisfying. Thank you very much. Okay. Our next honorees, as I mentioned, it's a pair of honorees. We call them the Beans & Co. gals in-house because Noelle Alex and Kim Morrison are co-owners of a coffee cafe in Avon called Beans & Company. It doesn't take long after you meet Kim Morrison and Noelle Alex to realize they are down-to-earth, practical gals, the kind of women who make the best neighbors, warm, friendly, happy, easygoing, filled with tips and ideas, available but not intrusive. And they're resourceful, not only in their professional lives as lawyer, for Noelle, and small business owner, which is Kim, but overall. You just don't get the sense that they get thrown off by problems, paralyzed with uncertainty about what to do next. Except for one. You see, Kim and Noelle became friends decades ago when they both joined the same playgroup with their daughters, Megan and Kate, who have Down syndrome. Early on, they bonded over the challenges and joys of raising their daughters, as well as their other children, while working in demanding jobs, keeping their households and families' social lives afloat. But the problem that started bugging them was this. What would happen to their girls when they turned 21 and aged out of the school system? What would their next steps be? What would their lives look like? Noelle and Kim knew that the picture wasn't good, that 80% of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, known as IDD, are under or unemployed. There were just not enough places that would hire their daughters or other people with IDD. So they decided to create one. In December of 2018, Kim and Noelle opened Beans & Company, a coffee cafe in Avon, in the same building as the New England Pasta Company, which Kim and her husband have owned for 27 years. Beans is an inclusive cafe, which means that half the employees have IDD and half do not. It is an enormously popular spot, not only for its delicious menu, but also for its charming atmosphere, a place of unhurried good cheer, of patience, of acceptance, of community. Now, Noelle and Kim are trying to convince other employers to see the wisdom in this good idea, to ask them to think about hiring inclusively, even just one person, and to help them recognize that inclusive employment is good not only for the employees, but for the employers too. They even did a TEDx talk about the idea last December. The Beans Gals confessed that they were worried about what would happen, what the pandemic would do to their little cafe, which was just barely 18 months old when the world shut down. As it turns out, they needn't have worried at all, because the magic they created with this good idea, so powerful in its simplicity, had in fact done just what they dreamed of. It had created a community where everyone belongs. When the pandemic threatened this place that they loved, that community came out of the woodwork, buying gift cards and takeout, and even helping to deliver meals to frontline workers and residents of Favre Group homes. Today, Beans & Company is fully open and busier than ever. Its employees are back at work where they always wanted to be and where they belong. So thank you, Kim and Noel. By prior agreement, we divided our questions. The first is for Kim. I asked the Beans Gals to reflect on this, that of all the things Beans & Company is, to me, it's the testament to a good idea. That people who are creative and determined, even when their lives are incredibly busy, can decide to find the time and energy to focus on a good idea. But my question was, how did you do it? How did you find the time? And how long did it take from the time that it was just a glimmer in your eye until the day you served your first coffee?
Okay, that's a great question, Michelle. Thank you, and thank you, everybody. It's an honor to be here. Finding the time in a busy day, there's no doubt this was a big undertaking for both of us, considering full-time lawyer and full-time owner of the New England Pasta Company. But what drove us was our daughters, Megan and Kate, and our shared worry of what life would look like when they transitioned out of high school to the age of 21. Noel and I have been friends for well over 20 years, as Michelle mentioned, and we've had hundreds, quite possibly thousands of discussions about all things Meg and Kate, believe me, from day one up until now. The good, the bad, and the ugly, yes, absolutely. But after, when Meg and Kate were going into high school and getting ready for going on to the transition academy, we found ourselves thinking about some more serious things, about what opportunities would be ahead of them in their lives as far as jobs, as far as social inclusion, or as far as connecting with the community. And all those things are so incredibly important to our families and to our girls. So what started out as a very casual conversation Noel and I had, and we escaped to Starbucks nonetheless. Figure that. And we were just talking about what we could do ourselves to help our girls find employment or employ them. And then the discussion kind of took a different change, and we got a little bit more serious. That first discussion happened kitchen. We didn't have to go out and build a kitchen. And we had 26 years of a very loyal customer base. And so now we were going to ask them to kind of buy into a new cafe, a new way, which they did, as Michelle said. You know, and knowing that with my business, you know, being cyclical and with the holidays, I saw Christmas coming. So, of course, I saw an opportunity, but we had to work pretty fast. Yeah. We wanted to be open for the holidays. So the timing was very fast. It was from the first conversation in the fall of 2017, and we opened our doors at Beans & Company December 1st, 2018. So very, very fast.
Wow, amazing. Noel, as a follow-up, what I'm wondering is, now that you and Kim are fostering the concept of inclusive employment beyond just your own cafe, what is the single biggest resistance you hear, the single reason people say that is not for me? And what do you say back?
Well, I'll start off with a positive note by saying almost anyone you talk to, any employer will say, that's a great idea, supports the mission of inclusive employment. How could you not, right? Like, who could disagree with that that's the right thing to do? But that same group of employers, typically their feeling is, I'm not experienced enough to do that. I think it's probably too hard. And if you're not part of the special needs community, we totally get it, totally understand that feeling because you don't live it day in and day out. So that it's too hard or it's too much work or I don't really know how to do it, that's where Kim and I found we could really kind of come in and really give assistance. We opened Beans. We thought it would be, we would hire employees, they would work for a while, learn the jobs, and then move on to another job. And that's the exact opposite of what happened. All of our employees came and they stay. And we don't have turnover there and we don't have enough space. Prior to the pandemic, we had 10 employees with IDD and 10 without. All is still original. So our secondary mission became very evident, which was encouraging other employers to hire even just one person. You don't have to do what we do at Beans and have a 50-50 staff, but you could create one position. So employers who maybe were hesitant or would come to us, say, I want to do that, but I really don't know how or how to do it. We found, okay, let's start small. You can create a job position. We could help, help you do that. Or maybe if you're thinking about hiring, say, an office assistant, maybe that position isn't everything. You could have someone do part of that job. We could be a sounding board for what were your worries, these employers' concerns and worries. Maybe that they feel not, that it's not okay to ask, where it's completely okay to ask. Everybody wants it to be successful. Inclusive employment needs to be successful for the employer as well as the employee. We totally get that as a business. It has to work for both. So we found that was really, as we're a way of combating the frustration or the barrier to inclusive employment, we're hoping by just talking and sharing that we can beat that down.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Next, I would like you to introduce you to Wonder Woman Sandy Casanelli from Glastonbury. Until I read the nomination form for Sandy, I had never heard the word metavivor. Frankly, that's partly because it just did not exist until about 10 years ago, when advances in cancer research made it possible for people with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer to keep living and living. So I looked up the word. While it was helpful to read the actual definition, it is Sandy herself who has truly made the idea come to life for me. First diagnosed and aggressively treated for breast cancer in 2013, when she was just 37 years old, Sandy was devastated when the cancer came back just 2 years later in her liver. Thus began her journey as a metavivor, which means that she not only forges on, living her life as fully as possible while still being treated, but also devotes enormous energy to the need for funds to advance research for this disease. Dying was not an option for me, says Sandy. I have 2 amazing, strong daughters who are the apples of my eye. I needed to find a cure. So in 2015, she founded Breast Friends Fund, a grassroots nonprofit that raises money to support metastatic breast cancer research at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, where Sandy is being treated. She and her husband, Craig, who own Greeno Packaging and Maintenance Supplies, have raised more than $647,000 through an array of fundraisers based in Glastonbury. They personally cover all fundraising expenses, and so 100% of the money goes directly to research. Certainly, the pandemic threw them a curveball. Because theirs is an essential business, Craig had to keep going to work in person, but Sandy, of course, could not. Sandy also had to travel alone to Dana-Farber for her scans, her treatments, and her doctor visits, and was alone when she got difficult news about relapses, twice. But she prefers to look at the silver lining, the things that the pandemic gave her, rather than the things it took away. Primarily, more time at home with her girls, who were going to school from home. In the end, I have to say that this is what a Mediviver is. It's Sandy, strong, beautiful inside and out, infectiously optimistic, someone who makes you feel bad complaining about your aches and pains. Actually, makes you feel bad complaining about anything. Sandy, on your form, you pointed out that you feel very strongly about using your situation to raise money for cancer, as well as awareness to make people realize that people with stage 4 cancer do keep living. What is it, do you find that you're still finding people who are surprised by that?
Thank you, Michelle. Such an honor to be here. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Yes, so years ago, stage 4 was a death sentence. One of the people didn't know what metastatic breast cancer was. I mean, if I went around the room, people wouldn't know what metastatic breast cancer was. I didn't know what it was. Our family didn't know, which is one of the reasons why we did find Breast Friends Fund, not only to raise funds, but to raise awareness that metastatic breast cancer is when breast cancer spreads to your bone, lungs, or liver, like mine. It was a death sentence because there was no funds, and to this day, even big cancer organizations only give 7% to metastatic breast cancer, which is why we founded Breast Friends Fund and give 100% to metastatic breast cancer. So it is no longer a death sentence. I'm very blessed to be living for over 6 years and going strong.
Thank you. We're blessed to have you with us. But the other thing I asked Sandy to talk about, not unlike what I asked Maurice to talk about, and actually all the Wonder Women, was that certainly there have to be days where the infectious optimism, the can-do spirit, is just not there. There must be times when it's hard to forge on and keep going. Where do you find the strength to do so?
I am so blessed to, at a young age, have a very, very deep Catholic faith. I was raised very Catholic. We went to church every day, and my faith in God is just so strong. And like I said, in my, dying's not an option. My girls and my husband give me strength every day.
That's beautiful. Thank you very much. And now I invite you to meet Wilma Hoffman of Newington. In full disclosure, I have to let you know that I myself am a knitter. So when I read the nomination for Wilma Hoffman, I must confess I was astonished. How in the world does this woman get teenagers, girls and boys alike, to take up kind of an old lady hobby, right, Wilma? Really? To sit and concentrate on a pair of needles and a ball of yarn. Especially kids who had been having problems in school as it was. Problems with structure and rules and keeping on track. After all, knitting requires pattern following. I mean, why would she even try? Once I met Wilma, I understood. And you will too when you get to know her. You see, Wilma is an educator, a lifelong teacher of the very best kind. A teacher who believes in the possibility of kids, who sees promise where others might see problems, who encourages you by looking into your eyes and saying, I know you can, rather than I doubt you will. It made perfect sense then for her to create a knitting club at the New Visions Alternative School, a program for students who have been expelled from the Hartford Public School System. It was the natural next step for a woman who'd spent 40 years as a special ed teacher, most recently at Bulkley High School. Over the last few years, Wilma has nurtured scores of teenage knitters, teaching them to knit and purl and to count stitches along the way, to making headbands and figureless gloves and scarves, to feel the satisfaction of having made something beautiful, to know the pride of having someone admire what they've made, and in some cases, to understand how good it can feel to give something back, which is what many of the students do when they donate their handmade items to the South Park Inn homeless shelter. Wilma says the students benefit in another way too, from the therapeutic, meditative aspect of knitting. It's a good way to get out anger, one of her students said. By the time you're not angry anymore, you've made something. There is another thing that brings Wilma great joy, aside from her children and her 4 grandchildren, of course, and that is the Make-A-Wish Foundation, where Wilma has volunteered for 35 years, even during the pandemic. Once again, she said the effort is more than worth her time when she sees the smile on the wished child's face. The pandemic had something of a transformational effect on Wilma. It turned this lifelong teacher back into a student. After mastering Zoom, there was no stopping her. She taught knitting, ordered groceries, and taught both kids and adults alike how to make fleece blankets, similar to the ones you saw on tonight's auction, which she made and donated to us. And she said it gave her lots of time to think about how fortunate she is. And I want to pick up, Wilma, where I ended, which is, that is quite a statement. Why, what do you mean? In what ways are you fortunate?
Thank you, Michelle, for honoring me tonight. I feel very honored, and thank everybody for coming here tonight. I really miss my students the whole time of the pandemic now. I've felt that I had to do some things on Zoom, and so I worked on Zoom at the Hartford Public Library teaching adults how to knit, and I worked at the Charter Oak Cultural Center on Zoom teaching young children, young girls, and no boys this time, how to knit, and they were doing a great job. I had to devise a way to, if you know how to knit, you know how difficult. You usually sit right next to the person and you are holding their hands practically and teaching them how to knit. And this way on Zoom, they're seeing you backwards. So I taught my granddaughter in North Carolina how to knit, and I figured out a way that I could tell them in words how to knit. And I was so proud that all these young girls, I taught like 3 sessions at the Charter Oak Cultural Center, and they did all learn how to knit, and we were making headbands and scarves, and they were so proud of themselves, and I was so proud of them. And I've always been so proud of my students. And actually, I taught adults at the Hartford Public Library on Zoom, too, and they were so happy when they made something. They all learned how to knit. And then I did one class on Zoom at the Charter Oak Cultural Center teaching them how to make blankets. Now, that was a real trip because we had to lay it out. I laid it out in my son's old room, the blanket on the bed, and I would cut and tie and double knot, and you had to... They all did it, though. I packaged the things up. Actually, it was a donation. Dr. William Pettit has helped me through the years with donations from my programs, my knitting program, and buying the fleece for the blankets. And I was lucky to have some money left over in order to buy fleece material at Joann's, where I always look for a bargain. And Dr. Pettit was always so proud of me that he'd write back to me and say, "Oh, you got a real bargain on that fleece." And so he supported me for several years at Buckley High School when I had the knitting program there, and he continued to support me even without writing a grant. He continued on to, because I was grant writing, but he continued to support me and give me funds so that I could buy yarn. Well, now, at this point in my life, I have a whole cellar full of yarn. I have, when that article went in the paper back, well, it's about 1.5 years ago, right before 2 years ago, I guess, I was getting donations of yarn from Minnesota, from California, from Indiana. People were calling me. I had pads of paper of people calling me and asking me, you know, can I send you yarn? And so I was so grateful for that. But getting back to why during the pandemic, it was a lonely, anxious time for me, but I did do these great things on Zoom, as Michelle said, ordering the groceries and things that I never did before. And besides that, I bought 2 heaters for my garage so that I could have friends over and we would bundle up in the garage and each one of us would have a heater by us. And I bought a bridge table and I started doing, painting rocks with, they call it mandala or mandala. You paint rocks with designs and you have, it's very therapeutic. Such as knitting. Knitting is very therapeutic and meditative for these students. And I even found that on Zoom, that people would say, I'm more relaxed. I do this at home in the evening. I see in TV and do it while I'm watching TV because I can't stop knitting. You know, I've had students that say, oh, I knit the scarf in one night because I'm so. The students at the expulsion school where I worked for until the pandemic, they were so enthusiastic. You wouldn't believe these children, these teenagers that had so many problems. They were suicidal. They were abused. They were in such bad shape, depressed. They were drug dealers. They would search them when they came into the school. And they would all see me and they say, oh, are we knitting today? I can't wait to knit. And we'd sit there and they'd come in a room where I had all the yarn. Of course, I had to take all the yarn out of there because now that's why I have like bushels and bushels of yarn in my cellar. But, and I just wish, I always loved working with those students so much. You know, that was something that I thought about during the pandemic, how I was lucky to be on Zoom, to be able to work with some students and some older women. They weren't seniors, but older women doing these things. And I just am so thankful that I was a teacher for over 40 years in the Hartford Public Schools. And I worked with very challenging students as a special ed teacher, but never so much challenging as the students at the expulsion school, because those students were expelled from their home school for various reasons, for knocking down the principal, for having a weapon, for doing drugs. And they were like given a certain period of time, like a sentence almost. You know, you have 6 months at the expulsion school, you have a year there. And so when I went in there, you know, you see all these tough looking kids, but that was the school that I had first worked in when I got a job in Hartford in the 80s. And so I went back to where my roots were and actually where I grew up. I grew up in the north end of Hartford. And so I never felt uncomfortable working there. And I always, the students always knew that I liked them so much, you know, and if a student, even a difficult student, knows that you like them so much, they respect you back, and they do whatever, well, not always, but usually they do whatever you ask them to do. But I didn't have to ask them to knit. They wanted to knit. And then they said, oh, knitting is so therapeutic. You know, they didn't use the word therapeutic, but they'd say, I feel calmer. And when they had a bad moment, when the teacher said that they were going to fight or something in the classroom, they would knit. And some students, I suggested as part of an IEP, as a special ed teacher, that they knit in the class so that they're calmer. And it works. It does work. So knitting has been my passion, as well as the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And so I've done the Make-A-Wish Foundation for 35 years. And I'm going to do a wish next week on Zoom. And while the pandemic was going on, I have a wish partner who's the principal at one of the schools in Hartford, and we do Zoom wishes. And they're not the same because, you can't see the child. It's better to be in the room with the child and see that smile on their face and feel like, oh my goodness, that child is, we never say they're terminally ill. We always say life-threatening illness, you know, that they have the life-threatening illness, but it's a terrible illness. And so, but we see them on Zoom, and next week I'm going to do a girl's wish on Zoom. And when I say do a wish, I mean make the wish come true. You know, take it down and do the paperwork. And so it's something that has kept me going through the pandemic, as well as having friends over to teach them how to knit and doing Zoom classes.
Thank you. Wow, Wilma. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And last but not least, I would like to introduce you, though probably most of you may know her, Dr. Pauline Olson of Farmington. Spending time with Pauline Olson is one of the great joys of my life. For the past 5+ years, I've had the privilege of working closely with her at the Malta House of Care clinic. Every moment has been a gift. Through Dr. Olson, I've seen the world with new and kinder, more loving eyes. I've been reminded of the intrinsic beauty in every single person, because that is truly how she sees people. And she has solidified my appreciation for the Irish gifts of storytelling and wry humor. And in my travels with Dr. Olson for Malta events and otherwise, I have met more people than I can count. You see, when you accompany Dr. Olson, anywhere really, your circle will expand. You will make new friends on every block, in every elevator, outside every mass. You just can't be in a hurry. That's because what Dr. Olson gives to this world, through the Malta Clinic, through her relationships with generations of patients, through her humanitarian work in other countries, and right here in the North End of Hartford, through the Malta Food Pantry that she founded 9 years ago, is time. If you think about it, that is the common denominator throughout all of her life's work, professionally and in retirement, through her many volunteer efforts. She gives the gift of time to every single person she meets, unhurried, sincerely and intently focused, listening like no one you'll ever meet, making you feel that you are truly the most fascinating, amusing, and just delightful person she has ever met. And she will never, ever rush you. She never has somewhere else to be that matters more to her than you do in that moment. Whether you are a pantry client picking up groceries, a patient coming for your annual GYN exam, a Malta staff member or volunteer, a hospital president, a neighbor in Farmington. Every single person is as important to Pauline Olson as the last. And so we celebrate Dr. Pauline Olson today for all of her service, personally and professionally, to thousands and thousands of people throughout her life. For all the babies she delivered, all the mothers' hands she held, all the fathers she hugged. For the food pantry, in her medical mission trips to Haiti, for her endless hours as a volunteer doctor on the Malta van, providing primary care to uninsured adults, and more recently, in a special women's health clinic on Fridays in the Malta office, because she realized that women wanted a more comfortable experience than they could typically receive on our van. In short, what we're really celebrating is who she is, her inner core, the remarkable combination of gifts, grit, and grace that make her, as her nominator wrote, an angel of mercy who shares her kindness, patience, and exceptional skill with all around her. So, Dr. Olson, I asked all the Wonder Women to provide a bio form, some answers to basic questions. And what she said was that she feels she has received so many blessings during her medical career that she should give something in return. I wondered if you could tell us about that, Pauline. What are some of those blessings?
First of all, thank you, Michelle, for organizing this event, and thank you all for coming. And thanks to my other Wonder Women. It was so interesting hearing your stories. Well, I don't want to be long-winded, but talking about blessings that I feel are real blessings, I will start many years ago. I was working as a medical doctor in a mission hospital in South Korea when I thought that I would really like to do a residency in OBGYN and become an OBGYN doctor after having qualified as an internist or a GP about 10 years earlier. So I applied for a residency in 2 programs in the US, one Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and the other St. Vincent's Hospital in Lower Manhattan in New York. I was accepted into both, but I chose St. Vincent's. And I started an OBGYN residency there in 1972. Moreover, because I had previous medical training, I was able to waive 1 year, and I graduated in 3 years. All of that, I think, was a big blessing. Next, I applied for a fellowship in maternal fetal medicine, and I came to St. Francis Hospital in Hartford. When I finished there, I was offered a job in the OBGYN department. That was in 1976, and I have been here since. Thank you. There was my association with the late John Gibbons. He was the head of the department. He was my boss for several years. He was a wonderful teacher and a wonderful physician, and I owe a lot to him. Later in Hartford, in my own practice, I was very privileged to have wonderful associates, hardworking, knowledgeable, easy to get along with, and we were a very happy, hardworking, I think, group. And I also feel very blessed that we had many wonderful patients over the years in the Greater Hartford area. In around 2000, the Order of Malta started a region in Hartford. The Order of Malta is one of the oldest Catholic organizations which was started in the time of the Crusades. And its mission is to defend the faith, because it was then a military organization, and also its mission is to take care of the poor and the sick. The Hartford region, as I said, started about 2000. I was asked to join, and I became a Dame of Malta in 2004. And I retired in 2005. And at that time, the Malta House of Care started in August of 2005 at St. Peter's Church in downtown Hartford on Main Street. So I became a volunteer there. And that year, it was pretty slow starting, but we saw a little under 500 patients. And now the clinic has 4 sites, and we have seen over 66,000 patients. Thank you. We all know that healthcare is an essential part of human life and dignity, and that access to it is a basic right. Unfortunately, in Hartford, as well as in many other places, that right is denied many people because of lack of health insurance. And the incidence of lack of health insurance in the Hartford area is about 12%. That hasn't changed over many years. Now, with the pandemic, it probably has increased because of the number who have lost jobs. And these patients, they come to us because basically they have nowhere else to go. Why do they have nowhere else to go? Where can they get free medical care, free exams, free labs, free x-rays, CAT scans, MRIs, whatever they need for diagnosis, and medication, which is too expensive for them to buy, like the different insulins or the newer drugs for diabetes, medicine for asthma, and for many other conditions which they have, for which they cannot afford the medication which is going to make them better. Working there has a lot of headaches, but it has a lot of joy. The fact that somebody who qualified as a physician and can really give help to these people is a joy. And it makes you feel good at the end of the day to have seen these patients who really have nowhere else to go. And as a patient will sometimes say, you know, if the Malta van was not here, if it wasn't in our neighborhood, we would already be dead. Well, that's not true, but it's their way of expressing to us how much it means that they can come to the Malta van and be treated there irrespective of their race, their immigration, or anything else. The only thing is that they need to have no medical insurance. Amongst many things that we as providers and nurses and social workers noted was that also a lot of these patients who, amongst other conditions, were very anemic, and that the only reason for their anemia was food insecurity. They were just hungry. And we also, from taking their histories, found out that a lot of them did not have enough money to buy food when they took care of their rents and whatever else. So we decided to open a food pantry, and we opened the food pantry in the north end of Hartford at St. Justin's Church in 2012. And since then, we have taken care of an average of 150 families a week who come to us on a weekly basis for food. We were fortunate that during the pandemic, we were still able to take care of not all of these families, but many of them who really needed food. And we now, during the pandemic also, changed our method of delivery. We have a drive-through pantry every Saturday morning. And that has been a big blessing. In all of this, talking about the clinic and talking about the food pantry, all under the Order of Malta, region of Hartford, we have to thank so many people, our donors, who are so many from the greater Hartford area, specifically, not to single out anybody, the Archdiocese of Hartford, right from the beginning, when we were in the planning stages, we owe a lot to St. Francis Hospital, and I should add that now having EPIC through St. Francis Hospital is a major help to us. And Hartford Hospital also for many of their programs, and for the many corporations and private trusts, and our many myriads of generous donors. Not to mention the volunteers, both at the Malta Clinic and at the food pantry. And I know many of you are here this evening, and I want to thank you all sincerely from the Malta House of Care.
I think that Pauline sums it up better than I could, but I invite you to give another round of applause to all 7 of our Wonder Women. I was struck in listening to their stories, as I was in developing the program for tonight, though they are so different and their service is so varied, there are so many consistencies among these 7 women. There's so much of a thread of selflessness that runs through. It's very inspirational.